Built by horse players for horse players, AmWager is designed for speed, power, and ease of use. AmWager brings CAW-style tools to everyday horse players, including Dutching, ABC Ticket Maker, and Pro Percent, an advanced betting tool that lets you assign weighted percentages and build multiple structured wagers with a single click. Every month, AmWager turns the odds in your favor with 0% takeout on select tracks. These promos offer you up to $100 more for your winning bets and giving you value for your wagers not offered anywhere else. Rated 4.7 stars on Google with over 200 reviews, AmWager is trusted by horse players who expect more from their wagering platform. If you're looking for better tools and better value, you need AmWager. Void where prohibited. For terms and conditions, visit amwager.com. Must be 18 or older, 21 or older where applicable. Gambling problem? Please call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY. Text HOPE.
Welcome to the Sport of Kings podcast, episode 366, sponsored by AmWager. Go to amwager.com to see all the promotions, including the upcoming 0% takeout on all win bets on all the races at Thistledown on Saturday, including the Ohio Derby, which we will talk about a little later in the show. As always, I welcome your feedback on Twitter/X. My handle is @Derby1592. And this week, I am joined by special guest Matthew DeSantis, NYRA bets analyst, for a detailed discussion about races 6 through 10 at Aqueduct on Saturday, along with some talk about the Ohio Derby from Thistledown. The show will focus on finding and exploiting value. We'll talk about our strongest handicapping opinions and how we might leverage those opinions using optimal betting strategies. Hi, Matthew. How's it going?
It's going great, Chris. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, I hear you're hanging out at Saratoga even when there's no racing. I imagine you're looking forward to the racing starting up again in a few weeks.
Absolutely. We love it up here in Saratoga, and the Belmont Stakes Racing Festival was fantastic. It's third and final year at Saratoga, and can't wait to get started here on the 4th of July weekend and run through a really fun summer up here at the spa.
Yeah, a few more days of racing at Aqueduct, and there'll be no more Belmont at Aqueduct or Belmont at Saratoga. It'll actually be Belmont at Belmont this fall.
It will be, and it's going to be really exciting, obviously. We'll kick things off with the Jockey Club Gold Cup, and that's going to be, I think, a really exciting race, and it's just wonderful to usher in horse racing into a 21st century facility in New York City. And I think that's going to really bring just a certain amount of prestige to the sport in the area. And it's just the sort of injection I think that we need for year-round racing in New York.
Yeah, I can remember. I'm old enough to remember when the Jockey Club Gold Cup was like a championship race. You know, Breeders' Cup ended that, and now it's sort of an also-ran. But there was a time when, that might be the race that decided who the horse of the year was going to be. So it'd be nice to bring back a little of the luster.
Yeah, absolutely. And, some of the names being bantied about right now, I don't want to get into too much, but I think it could be a pretty special race that might not dictate horse of the year, but it might dictate who's the favorite going into the Breeders' Cup.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, the Breeders' Cup sort of changed the whole fall calendar. New York fall racing used to be, championship racing for sure. So it'd be nice to bring it back in the new facility. And I actually will be heading out to Saratoga this summer. The week of July 25th, I think, is the Saturday. And I'm doing a little book tour for my new book, Betting on Horses. And I'll be doing a book signing on Friday, July 24th. So any of the listeners that are out at Saratoga that week, please stop by and say hello. I'm really looking forward to that trip, and I'll be spending some time with my friend Marshall Graham, who has a place up there, and really looking forward to spending a week at Saratoga. You're spending more than a week, but so I envy you there. But a week is, I'll take that any day. And my book, Betting on Horses, which I like to mention on every podcast, still available at betwiththebestmedia.com. So maybe you get a copy of that. Bring it along. I'll sign it on the 24th if you live in the New York area.
Well, that's very cool, and I can't wait to come to the event and support that. And I just have to say, I think any player should absolutely look into buying that book and really take a deep dive. I think the start of any meet is a great time to maybe start fresh sometimes and to really think about what it is that we value as horse players and kind of what are some of the keys that sometimes it's easy to forget on a day-to-day basis. And so applaud your efforts on the book. Excited to see you this summer, and definitely, like I said, encourage people to get the book if they haven't already.
Thank you. I appreciate the plug for the book. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I talk about in there is that you need to constantly challenge yourself, have to be adjusting and improving and changing with a changing game to stay successful or to become successful. So, and one of the ways to do that, one of the ways that I've done that is, reading books, listening to podcasts, and that's sort of why I started the podcast and why I wrote this book, because there really hasn't been any sort of kind of comprehensive book for horse players that has come out anytime recently, at least in the last 10 years. Probably the last real horse player book was Mike Maloney's book back in the DRF press days, which are long gone. And, game has changed a lot. So I tried to write a book that's sort of up to date with all the changes and give players an idea of some things they might want to work on to improve their game. And I'll tell you what's been the most satisfying part of doing the book is getting feedback from people, especially players that have been doing it for a long time that I respect, that are good players, that said just reading parts of the book kind of re-energized them and got them excited about, trying something new and different, to maybe approach the game a little differently, got their juices flowing again. It's exactly what I was hoping to do. And, that's why I wrote the book. So I encourage others, if you haven't already, if you have read the book and you have some feedback, I always love to hear it. But if you haven't and you are the kind of person who's willing to make some changes and trying to improve all the time, I think this book will help you in that regard. It's not just me. I have quite a few really sharp players share some of their wisdom and ideas. So I think anybody gets something out of that book.
Absolutely. And it's so important, I think, is, one of the traps that I tend to fall into, and it's why a book like this I think is so important and these discussions are so important, is as a public handicapper, I'm somebody who's very cognizant of not listening to other people before I put my opinions out there. I don't like to, I kind of almost put myself in an isolation booth a lot of times when it comes to big races and things like that. And I'll get all my analysis done and I'll kind of do all my writing or my videos. And then I might end up consuming some of the other people's content. I just don't like having, other people's opinions maybe sometimes falling into my own, or, just accidentally kind of almost lifting somebody else's ideas and thoughts on a race. So I just like to be in isolation. But the downside of that is I don't necessarily always engage in those conversations or hear those conversations about wagering. And so I think that's such an important part of it, that it's not just about handicapping a race, but ultimately how you wager a race. And I think listening to people and learning from others about the do's and don'ts of wagering is so important, and something that every single horse player, doesn't matter how experienced you are, always needs to come back to.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the main elements of my book, is that you, as a horse player, to really become good at the craft, you not only have to be a good handicapper, but you have to be able to bet your opinion in an effective way. Both those dimensions are equally important. And depending on circumstances, the betting side may become more important than the handicapping side, especially when you get into the more complex wagers. Win betting, maybe not so much, but you start playing a pick 5 or a pick 6, the betting side becomes probably more important than the handicapping, and probably where most people make mistakes and have the biggest room to improve.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't speak to the number of times just in the last few months I've hit a pick 5 where I think I've only had one top pick winner, in that sequence. But it was just about how I layered the rest of those races and how you put it all together. And, Yeah, there's a big difference once you start getting into those multi-race sequences between handicapping and betting. And so, again, appreciate everything you do with this book. And it's a conversation that we get so caught up in the day to day so often that sometimes we forget to take a step back and look at the big picture and remind ourselves what are our priorities from a wagering standpoint.
I agree. And that's a good lead into one of the things I like to do is kind of find out from the guest what's sort of your high level approach to analyzing a race and deciding which races you might bet, and if so, how you're going to bet those, just kind of at a high level.
Yeah, at a high level, it really comes down to, for me, there's kind of two parts to it because as a public handicapper, I often have to give out picks in every single race. And so, I'll certainly do that. But from a wagering standpoint, it really is when, something really jumps off the page to me. And that's when either a horse that I think is going to be tremendous odds is, kind of sitting there. And I realize that's a horse I can build a sequence around to some extent. And so at a high level, I look for those types of races and those types of horses within races that I can build a sequence around. And that doesn't always have to be a pick five. It could just be a pick three or something like that. But at a high level, I look for those types of races. I tend to really, I mean, this is just more from a handicapping perspective, but I tend to really hone in on maiden races. That's where I tend to do very well. And so I usually love finding those sequences with those maiden races where I can leverage opinions, where I might have a little bit of an advantage over other players and see some things in those races where I can, again, leverage that betting opinion to really kind of zig where other people are zagging. But I think always looking for an opportunity to go against the grain in any particular race is kind of my general strategy towards things. Because if you just end up, falling on the favorite in every single race, maybe you do find a 3 or 4 or 5 race sequence where favorites win all of them, but it's really not a very profitable approach. So at a high level, just always trying to find those opportunities to go against the grain and try to find something in the racing form that leads you to a horse that might be a little bit of a price that you feel like you can really leverage your tickets around.
Yeah, in the book especially, I talk about how you need to kind of find that edge and separate yourself from the crowd. So it sounds like that's exactly the way you're thinking, at least from the betting standpoint. It's got to be a little tough for you because you have to make picks in all these races you're looking at. So you kind of have to step back and say, okay, I've done the analysis. Now, which of these would I really want to bet? And it sounds like that's the way you approach it.
Yeah, it is. And it's one of those things where I do often take a step back and you think about, okay, well, which of these races do I really have my strongest opinions? And what does that look like? And and sometimes it is as simple as maybe on a particular card, there are just two horses that really stand out to me. And maybe it comes down to just like, hey, these are two really strong win bets today that I just feel strong about. And maybe I don't love the races around those two, those two opinions. And so maybe it's not about trying to put together a whole sequence as much as just really leveraging that. So it is important, because sometimes we do, I think, fall in love with our picks as public handicappers. And sometimes it's easy to fall into the habit of just like, oh, well, I gave out the picks for this race. Well, I'll just throw this into a pick three or a pick four or pick five. And it's like, is that really the smart thing to do? And taking a step back and being a little bit more deliberate and I say the word conservative sometimes in that approach. I would say I tend to be a little bit more of a conservative player, and I don't sit there and believe that you need to fire away in every single race. And it's really about finding the right opportunities to pounce and to really profit.
Yeah, you hit on a couple of points in the book that are really good. Just want to echo. One was, you don't have to bet every race. You can pass races. Another is you want to tailor your bet to your opinion. If it's just that there's one horse you like to bet to win and you really don't like anything else in that race or surrounding races, just bet to win. You don't have to make those other bets. But, if there's some other second opinion that you can combine that first opinion with, then you start thinking about, okay, maybe there's an exacta or a trifecta or a double or a pick three. So, and then finally, you talked about you kind of like certain kinds of races. In your case, it was maiden races. Finding that thing where you can specialize, where you think you're a little better than the crowd at finding value and focusing on those races and concentrating on those. Those are all do all those things together, and you have a much better chance at being successful, or at least more successful than not. Those are examples of the kinds of stuff I talk about in the book. So I think they're really good. And fortunately for you, the sequence we're going to look at has plenty of maiden races to share your wisdom on and help us through, because they are not for the faint of heart, I think, in terms of the betting perspective. So we'll get to those. But before we do, one last thing I like to do is talk about the betting menu at the track we're focused on this week, which is the Aqueduct, or Belmont at Aqueduct, and NYRA in general. And I've been saying this for weeks now, that NYRA is the only track ownership that has really made an effort to better manage the CAWs. They have put restrictions on CAW access to all pools, not just the win pool. I applaud them for it, and I really want to encourage all the players to reward NYRA's effort by playing the races. If you shift some or all of your play towards NYRA because they're managing the CAWs, then you are going to get better results as a player. I guarantee you will get better results. And so it's to your own benefit. But also, if we do that collectively as players, and NYRA sees an increase in handle despite the loss of handle that they're going to suffer because of what they're doing to manage the CAW access, then that's going to send a strong message to NYRA to keep doing what they're doing, but also to the rest of the industry to follow suit, because as players, we'll show that we are capable of changing, and we are rational, and we will move our handle to where the CAWs are better managed and away from where they are allowed to run wild and crush retail players consistently. And we're tired of getting T.O. Elvis with these late odd swings at the last minute. So, let's do it as horse players. Let's try to save this game. It's not too late to change. And by changing, you'll improve your results, but you'll also help this game, because if we don't, and things continue the way they are going now, this game, that is, from a betting standpoint, just continues to get worse. And it will continue to do so if we don't make a difference. So I encourage everybody to do that. Rant over. We can get to the races now, Matthew. So we'll start with, we're going to go through races 6 through 10, the last 5 races at Aqueduct, but also we'll talk about the Ohio Derby, because everyone's always interested in the 3-year-olds. And this is the first kind of, I guess, call the Midwestern Derby series that a lot of the Triple Crown horses end up in, and we've got some of those in that race, so that'll be fun to talk about. But we'll start with the 6th race. It's the claiming race at 1 16th on the turf for 3-year-olds and up. What are you thinking in this race? It does look like we got a heavy favorite, kind of wide open. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, it's an interesting race, and it's one that I would approach, a few different ways depending on the types of wagers you're interested in using. And so you're right, the number 7 late call, 2-1 on the morning line for trainer Derek Ryan, does really stand out from a class standpoint. It's just been running against tougher competition, running against Allowance Company, mostly at Tampa and Monmouth. Is obviously moving into a different circuit, but has been very consistent in those low 80 buyer speed figures, which really does stand out in this field. So, he's the sort of horse that he's really tricky to start off a late pick 5 with, because he's the sort of horse that maybe you want to leverage as a single, but it's a $20,000 claimer, and these aren't always necessarily the most reliable horses. He's more so of a horse that I would think about using in an exacta up top, and I'd kind of use him, and then the 2 other horses that I'm interested in that are a little bit better value is the number 4 High Tide for Untitled Chapter, 9-2 in the morning line with Jose Lezcano up. And this is an interesting horse to me that's finally getting back on the turf. And this horse ran some decent races on the turf going back to 2024, but switched over to a few different barns and had just been running on the main track basically, and running fine, actually collecting a couple of wins. But I love that this one's getting back onto the turf and willing to take a little bit of a shot here, first off the claim for Chatterpaul. And then the real one that I'm interested in at a price is the number three Polar Bear Plunge, 8-1 for Mercan Cantermossi. And this one has Manny Franco up. Cantermossi's and Franco I always like as a duo a little bit. And this one's taking a pretty significant class drop, going from a claiming 50 all the way down to a claiming 20. Again, you go back and look at those past performances. I'm willing to draw a line. Obviously, that last time out was against much tougher. And then two back was over a yielding turf course. So again, I'm willing to kind of draw a line through that one too. And you look at those other races, he was running again, high, or I should say kind of low 80s and 70s buyer speed figures, which again stack up very well in this field relative to his 8-1 morning line odds. So, there's not a lot of horses that are the winning type in here with a lot of career starts. And so I just thought, geez, the seven really does stand out, but he's the type of horse I'd use. And a very simple exacta with him up top and the 3-4 Polar Bear Plunge and High Tide underneath.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's yeah, like you said, these claiming races, this isn't my favorite kind of race, just for the reason you said. It's really hard to trust anybody in this kind of race.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm usually looking for is maybe a horse that's had some back numbers that are, capable of winning and seems to be cycling back into form, as opposed to horses who maybe seem to be tailing off. So like, Polar Bear Plunge for me is kind of the tailing off type. So certainly wouldn't be shocked to see the horse win because it's run races capable of winning, but it's not the kind I'm usually interested in betting. Late Call, kind of the same way. That horse, it's been running consistently, but, not really running any races that make it a standout in here. It's probably going to be somewhere near the end, at the finish at the end, but, not definitely from a value standpoint, there's really not much there. So usually I'm looking either for a horse that has a big tactical edge maybe, or that's cycling into form. From a tactical standpoint, there seems like there's two horses with speed in here, the 2 Bar 14 or the 5 Life and Light. Bar 14 just ran last week, so I'm wondering and he's got a stablemate entered in this race too, so I'm wondering if they're actually going to go in here. I actually played that horse. That was on the Monmouth card last week, and that was kind of a heartbreaker. He got nailed at the wire, unfortunately. So that one cost me. Well, actually, I made money on the race, but I would have made a lot more if he had won. So, and he's in pretty good form, but that was probably the time to have him. And like I said, he might scratch. If he does scratch, I'm kind of interested in the 5 Life and Light, who seems like the other horse that wants to be forward. And, if Bar 14's in there, I don't like him so much because they're probably going to, compromise each other's chances. But if Bar 14 were to scratch, Life and Light, kind of interesting to me. It could be the horse that gets loose on the lead at a price. So that's one I would be interested in. But assuming that Bar 14 goes and Life and Light goes, because if Life and Light were to scratch and Bar 14 was in, then I'd kind of have the same argument, but he's not going to be as good a price. But I actually like his stablemate, which is the kind of cycling into form kind. This horse ran some races last year that certainly could win in here. And, he came back in a couple dirt races, which didn't run a step. But as soon as he got back on the turf, he woke up. He kind of got behind, made a middle move, and hung. You can't tell on the running line, but he actually got right to the throat latch of the leader and then just tired late, but probably needed that race. And, now that race was at 1 1/8 on the turf. Now he's cutting back to shorter distance, probably better distance for him. He's got that tightener on the turf. I'm just going to ignore those first 2 races off the layoff, which probably just help his price. So he's the kind that's circling back into form, as my old co-host Scott Carson would say. This really is a circle back pattern on the sheets. And, he could be a pretty good price. He's 4-1 in the morning line. I was a little surprised to see him that short in here. Maybe a little value there. I'm kind of hoping he floats up above that. But to me, he's probably the one I think is most likely to run well and fits in here. So, I that horse is probably the main horse I would play, and then um, unless there's some scratches, I probably was if there were some scratches, I might be interested in one of those two speed horses.
Yeah, it's so interesting you bring that up because I thought the same thing about the speed. That is, I mean, from a handicapping standpoint, the very first thing I always do is look at the pace of the race. And so before I look at speed figures, before I look at class, I just want to look at pace. And I saw the same thing you did, which was, hey, there are these two speed horses. And again, this is one where, and I think this is also an important point to bring up. Whereas as players, you have to be flexible and you can handicap and, even think about your wagers of a race a couple of days ahead of time. But when scratches and changes come out, you have to adapt. And I think you're absolutely right that if one of those two horses scratches, particularly if the two scratches, suddenly that five becomes much more interesting as just being alone up on the lead for Ruben Silvera. And listen, that's the one thing up here in New York. Very many times on the turf, you can really put them to sleep up front, and give them the slip, around the far turn. So that five would be massively upgraded, in my opinion, should the two scratch out of this race.
Yeah. So if they both go. Well, in New York, even when they both go, if it's only two, one of them might get grabbed, and then it's probably the one that you played, or
Uh-huh.
so I mean, just whenever it seems like there's just two horses, I always make a note of that for the two reasons you said. One is if there's a scratch, all of a sudden the one that stays in looks much tougher, but the other is they may decide, one breaks poorly, or they decide tactically they're going to try something different. Like the five horse doesn't typically finish off his races. The life and light.
Hmm.
The horse does. It's not a win machine, let's say. So they may decide, well, if we don't want to hook up with the two, and they may let him go, and all of a sudden the two is gone. So you never know, but that's why tactics can play a big part in these turf routes all the time. But
Absolutely.
especially when there's only like two horses probably that want to be forward, and all the rest kind of want to track them. So we'll see.
Yeah,
Tough race
it's
to start it off
absolutely.
on though.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Hard to trust anybody in here. Certainly at a short price. All right, let's move on to the next race, the seventh race. There's a lot of New York bred races in this sequence. So it's not a New York bred, I guess, New York Stallion eligible, and I won't get into all the details, but they don't necessarily have to be bred in New York. I think they can go they can breed outside the state as long as the foal is born in the state or something. I don't want to get into all the details, but it's a stakes race, 6 furlongs on the turf for 3-year-olds. This is one of these interesting things. It's called the Spectacular Bid Stakes. I don't think Spectacular Bid ever ran on the turf. Certainly, I don't think he ever sprinted on the turf. I don't know why you would name a 6 furlong turf race after Spectacular Bid. He certainly could sprint at 7 furlongs on the dirt. He was a monster, but he was also a monster, of course, at 1.25 miles on the dirt. So
Yeah,
I never have figured out how they name some of these stakes. This one doesn't seem like the right horse to name this race after. But hey, I bet you Spectacular Bid probably could have been a pretty good turf sprinter if they had tried him. Um,
absolutely. No, the division names elude me as well often. I just stick to the New York Stallion Series races. But no, I completely agree with your assessment of that one for sure.
he was a good horse, though. Spectacular
Yes,
Bid was one
right.
of the best horses I've ever seen run. He was a beast, and his 4-year-old year, he was just incredible. So. All right. What do you think about the race? This one does have, again, lukewarm favorites, although it seems to me like Spirit of New York will probably end up being a stronger favorite than 3-1. He's coming off the layoff. What are you going to do with that one? What do you think of this race?
Yeah, he's a tough horse to, it's certainly in a multi-race sequence. He feels like a dangerous horse to throw out just because the trainer like Adam Rice is so good at bringing these horses back from long layoffs. And he is a horse that's already been a stakes winner, going 6 furlongs at Belmont at the Big A, going back to his 2-year-old season. So he's proven amongst this group. He likes the turf. And that's the other interesting thing is, I mean, there's a few horses in here who are trying turf for the very first time in a stakes race. So to go with a horse that is a reliable turf runner is not a bad thing. But again, he hasn't run since December 6th. That's a really big question mark, I think it's fair to say. And so, the two horses that I think it really stood out to me in this field, we'll start with the one that I really like the most, which is the number 7 Sunday Boy for Jimmy Ryerson. This horse is third back in the form cycle, has run on turf a few times. I thought his last effort, albeit with the assistance of Lasix, was a really good effort. I like the outside draw. He's got enough speed to make sure that he's not hopelessly out of it, but should be able to run into something in this particular race. And I'm really encouraged by the fact that the horse that won the race last time out against New York Bred Allowance Company, Voodoo Doll, came back to win against Open Company in a $100,000 optional claimer next time out for Mark Casse. So it was encouraging to see that was a pretty productive race. And you're getting a good price on Sunday Boy with Chris Elliott aboard at 9-2. So that's a horse that will be third back in the form cycle and seems to be running against good competition. Again, a reliable turf form in this field is maybe a little difficult to come by, which takes me to my other horse that I really like, which is the number 3 Wit Storm, 7-2 for Barclay Tag with Katie Davis up on the mount. This one's coming out of a fourth place effort in that same race against Voodoo Doll and Sunday Boy. And that was the first time against winners, first off of a little bit of a freshening. Now you're kind of getting second from that freshening. Definitely seems to fit, has never really run a bad race, and you're getting a little bit better price. And I agree with you. I think Spirit in New York will end up taking some money. So, beyond the 3-1 morning line. So for me, I thought the 3 and the 7 were the two horses that were interesting to me that you could, either if in a multi-race sequence, if you want to try to beat the 4, those are the two that I would try to do it with. Or, depending on how scratches and changes play out, really just leveraging a win bet on one of those two for me.
Yeah, the one thing I would mention, too, Sunday Boy didn't have the best of trips last time either. So probably could have got a little better result with a little better trips. So that one makes a lot of sense for sure. Now, I don't have a lot to add. I don't really like anything in this race much. The one horse that I was trying to get interested in, but I would probably need a price bump from the morning line, is the 5 horse Dancing with Destiny.
Yeah.
That horse has what I talk about as the golden pattern. It's going second off the layoff. It probably has developed quite a bit from 2 to 3. Had quite a long layoff there, it's like 7 months. It came back with a nice effort. It, wasn't great, but it kind of like you expect. It got a little tired at the end after setting some pretty sharp early fractions. And, now second off the layoff, it should be fitter and ready to roll. And, there's other speed in here, but the other main speed is a little bit of a question mark on the turf. That's the 6 Illmatic. But, those two, if one of those two were to get the lead, they could be tough to run down. From a price standpoint, I think Dancing with Destiny is going to be the better price. And I like the way that horse, it's proven on the turf. And it's that second off the layoff. This is probably going to be the best race of its life. Now, if it gets in a speed duel with the 6 horse Illmatic, then it's probably going to be tough to win. And that 6 horse is kind of interesting too, just because it did show speed and fade. Actually lost the Spirit of New York on its debut as a 2-year-old, and then they put it on the dirt and it has run well on the dirt. But its turf effort wasn't that bad. Now they're going back on the turf, so that horse also looks dangerous. So the 5 or 6. And to me, I'm always looking at speed in these turf sprints. And like I said, when there's really only 2 horses, I think, that are going to, be vying for the lead. If one of them breaks poorly or one of them scratches, the other one becomes really dangerous. So Those are the two I'd be probably interested in beyond the ones that you mentioned. But this is a race I'd have a hard time betting unless one of those two were to float up way well above their morning line.
Yeah, I agree with you. Your assessment of Illmatic was very similar to what I saw as well. And looking at the pace scenario, I do think the number nine is another question mark as well. I mean, I don't know if that one's quite as fast as the others that you mentioned. Nasuna Pagina, the number nine here at 6-1 for Paul Barrow. But one of the things I will pay attention to is like that one has Kendrick up. And one of the things I know is Kendrick's always going to be aggressive in these types of spots. And the horse draws to the outside. Now, again, there's not a lot of turf pedigree there. We're coming out of Finger Lakes. I don't necessarily expect the horse to be around late, but he's the sort of horse that could, again, factor into how does the pace play out in the early parts of this race. And certainly, if you have a horse like that, kind of also pressing the issue, even if it's just stalking on the outside, it could just lead to a little bit of a stronger pace, and it gives the opportunity for some of these other horses to run into something. But yeah, it's a tough race just because there is kind of a lot of questionable turf form in this race for a turf sprint stakes race. So I understand why people would land on the four, but for me, I'm going to try to beat a horse like that every time.
Yeah, I wouldn't, the fours wouldn't be a surprise at all. I'd have a hard time betting this race anyway, unless the odds are much different than the morning line. So, and I don't expect that. So this is probably another race where I'd pass. One thing, a lot of times in these state bred races, you'll get horses trying different surfaces and distances just because they're chasing a purse, in the state bred ranks. So that's not unusual to see that in these kind of races.
Yeah,
All
no,
right.
it's not. And yeah, you'll see horses take to a new surface and do great, and maybe even find a new career sometimes, by doing that surface switch one way or the other.
Yeah, and if you get a price and you think there might be a reason they'll take to it, then they're good plays. Um, but a lot, more often than not, they are probably just, taking the shot.
Yeah.
It may or may not work out. All right, so let's go to the next race in the sequence. It doesn't get any easier. This one is another New York bred. This is a maiden claimer, 7 furlongs on the dirt, 3-year-olds and up. Another kind of a beast of a race. This one, again, there's no kind of standout favorite, at least on the morning line. What are you thinking in here? Another interesting race, another tough race.
It is a tough race, and my general approach to maiden claimers is, I just am usually allergic to taking a horse at a short price in these types of races, just because often these are horses that have been kicking around for a little while. So I tend to look for horses that have fewer performances already on the running lines. And so I figure, hey, they have more of an opportunity not to disappoint here as opposed to horses that have, 6, 7, 8 career starts. And maybe there's a class drop, but still I'm a little questioning of whether this horse is the winning type. And so the two horses for me that are a bit of a price that stand out are the 2 and the 4. And listen, they didn't do much running in their debut races at all. But Gattoli, the number 2, as well as the number 4, Dinner Royale, fit a profile that I like, which is Amelia Green. We'll start with the number 4, Dinner Royale, who's actually kind of my top choice in this race. This is just the makeover package that I usually look for in maiden claiming races. The blinkers are coming on. The horse is getting Lasix for the first time. It's a first time gelding, and we're doing a class drop. There's a lot going on here. And you also have a barn switch from Rudy Rodriguez to Amelia Green, who's doing very well up here in New York. You got a top jockey and Manny Franco up on the mount, which is always something that draws my eye in these types of races. And the better part is, this horse showed at least a little bit of interest in being a part of the early pace in that debut, breaking from an inside rail last July at Saratoga. Now, the horse hasn't run since. Breaking from the rail is never easy. The fact the horse showed at least a little bit of speed in the early going, I think, is promising. Now we're getting blinkers on. The horse is matured. It's 8-1 on the morning line. This is the sort of horse I like to get excited about and potentially put some money on. So the 4 for me got a little bit of an upgrade and was one I was interested in. And then the number 2, Gattoli, 6-1 on the morning line, same sort of thing. You get the class drop from Maiden Special Weight Company. You got a surface switch from turf to dirt. You also get Lasix for the first time and blinkers on. So it's just that makeover package is something that I always gravitate to in these types of maiden claiming races. Again, you get Dylan Davis attracted to the mount here for Charlton Baker. And there really is not a ton. I mean, there's a little bit of turf pedigree here in the family, but it's mostly dirt and it's sired by Matoli. So I think going to the dirt makes a lot of sense. I like the workout on June 2nd. So for me, those are two horses, Gotoli at 6-1 and Dinner Royale at 8-1 that I think were worth taking a shot on in their second starts.
Yeah, and I would just add that Dinner Royale did have a 48 flat gate work recently in preparation for this. And the two horse had also a pretty sharp gate work before its debut. And that did kind of look like a prep. It was on the turf. It just, so, I could see, but you don't know, you just have no idea at what talent level these horses have. But
Right.
you expect them to run better than they did on debut, at least. And they neither did a lot of them running on debut, but they could be much better. So I absolutely see where you're coming from on those. Anything else in this race? I had a couple of thoughts, but anything else that besides those two that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I mean, certainly a horse like the number 5, Mo Curls, who's I think your favorite at 3-1. Listen, I understand that it's the class drop. I always am a little cautious when I see a horse turn in such a poor effort and then do the class drop as this one did last time. That said, that race has come back very productive with multiple next out winners. So again, there are things to like about the 5, but again, at a short price, I tend to be very cautious of that. The other horse that I will say that I was interested in, I didn't bring up in my top two, but as my third selection is the number 7, Always Honest, 9-2 for Jose Jimenez. I thought this horse was a little bit interesting, willing to draw a line through the sloppy race two back. Last time out was facing tougher, now dropping back down in class, probably at the right level. And 9-2, I thought was an honest enough price for this one. So that was another one that I thought was a little interesting, but eager to hear your thoughts on this race.
Yeah, I don't. A couple other horses I'll mention. The 3 Zeus Lightning.
Hmm.
That horse started its career on the turf, then ran in the slop. So its first 3 starts as a 3-year-old were on the turf and in the slop, all routing. And then they brought it back off the layoff, sprinting on the dirt. Didn't run too bad, and then they put it back out on the again routing on the turf, and it had some trouble in that race. But it showed a little life in that one, I thought. And so now they have it back on fast dirt sprinting, and it should be fit and ready to run well. And its races aren't that bad compared to these. It had been in straight maidens until that last one, but that was on the turf. So to me, this is the spot where if this horse has some ability on the dirt, on a fast track, this is where he should be fit and ready to run. The only other time he's had that opportunity was off the long layoff. So that's one I think could improve and could get overlooked. So Zeus Lightning is kind of interesting to me in here. Not impossible and could be a pretty good price. And then the other one I'll mention is more like the first two you mentioned is the one Tony Hooks. He's making his third start rather than his second, but his first start was in the muddy track. His second start was on the turf. So this is his first chance to run on fast dirt, and he gets blinkers on. And, he's just like the two that you mentioned. He could be much better than what his, recent race showed. You don't know how good, but this is his first chance to run on the fast dirt. Gets the blinkers. I don't like being down on the rail, but he'll be a really big price. He'll probably get completely overlooked. So those are two I might mention, but this is a race tough for me to get excited about anything. But if I were forced to bet a horse off the morning line, if I got those prices, it would be the 3 Zeus Lightning. I think he's very likely to run. I already know, he's run faster than most of these in here. And I think he has a chance to improve. And he's not far behind the favorites that you mentioned, the 5 Mo Curls and the 6 in on it. So to me, he's one I'm kind of interested in.
Yeah, I think that it definitely makes sense with regards to the one and the three. And I think the general takeaway, if people are listening, is bet against the favorites in this race. I think, we're
Yeah,
both.
demand a price in this kind
Yeah,
of race,
yeah,
and don't
exactly.
be yeah, and be looking for that horse that might show dramatic improvement. In these lightly unexposed horses where they have only had one or two tries and maybe haven't had tries under these conditions. So that's when you can see, real dramatic improvement. And that's probably the way to play it, but you don't want to be betting the mortgage on it or anything like that either in this kind of race.
No, but it's a race. I'll say this, like if I were even playing like a late pick three, or if I was in a pick five, like this is the sort of race where I'll let those favorites beat me and I'll come
Right.
back with another wager. Like I'm not going to be including horses defensively. And this is a sort of race where I think players will end up getting their tickets so bloated because they're afraid to get beat by somebody. And you just have to draw a line in the sand sometimes and go, yeah, I'm not going to bet this horse. I'm going to demand a price. And if they beat me, they beat me and we move on. But, this is one where I'm not going to, spread, five or six deep necessarily in this field. Like I'm going to leverage the opinions about, two or three horses that I really like and move on to the next race.
Yeah, and if you don't really like anything, then just pass the race.
Yeah,
You don't have to
exactly.
play it. Um,
Yeah.
is when these maiden claimers, sometimes you can get. Sometimes I get. These are some of my favorite races to bet, more on the turf than the dirt. So I can find horses that I really like. This one I don't really have that. Although the three horse, I could maybe see myself playing him if he were to stay at 10-1 or float up above that. But I mean, you don't have to play every race.
Yeah.
And if it's, you don't like playing maiden claimers, don't even waste time handicapping them. You don't have to play every race. You don't have to handicap every race. Now, maybe you do because that's your job. But, the normal horse player out there, you can
Yeah.
triage the card and say, hey, you know what? There's some race on here. I don't even want to waste any time on them. I'm going to focus on the ones where I have a better chance of finding some value. So that's the way to think about it.
Absolutely.
All right, so we go on to another easy race. This is a claimer. This is same distance, same surface, 7 furlongs on the dirt, but this is for, claimers that have won a race, or probably have won a race. I don't think there's any maidens in here that are entered in this. This is another one. Again, I don't know if we've had a morning line favorite below 3-1. Oh, wait, I guess we did have 1 2-1.
Oh yeah, the first one. Yeah, they
Yeah.
called the first race.
But even on the morning line, there's not a lot of uh, separation. So you could probably go a lot of different ways in here. What are you thinking on this race?
Yeah, this is another one of those. Honestly, my approach to a race like this and most N2Ls is actually very similar to what I just said with regards to maiden claimers. I look for horses that have just had fewer opportunities to disappoint me. And so horses that are 1 for 20 are not really going to end up on many of my tickets. So, I tend to look for horses that are a little more lightly raced and it might just, maybe it took them a while to find the right class level in the maiden ranks, or they have a muddied up form in general. So for me, the horse that really stood out that I'm interested in at a bit of a price is the number 7 Solutions, 10-1 for David Donk with Dalia Rivera up on the mount. And this is one that I think just was way over his head the first few times out, and honestly didn't even run that terribly in debut against Maiden Special Weight Company back in May of last year. Then went to the turf, then went to a little bit of a layoff, then got dropped down to $100,000 maiden claimer, then came back, off a very long layoff and really hit the right level, which was a maiden 12-5 and and won easily as your odds on or your nearly odds on favorite, even money favorite that day. Now you're facing winners for the first time. So yes, there's a little bit of a class jump, hence why you're getting 10-1 on the morning line. But this is a horse that showed good speed on a jockey that has been riding very well and being very aggressive, and I just think fits at this level in terms of like a claiming 15 type of a horse, and I think is very competitive at this level. So 10-1, that was one. I'm interested to see what this horse will become post time because if this horse stays around that price, I'd be very interested in just betting this horse as a straight win bet in this
It
particular
doesn't seem
race.
like it will. I think that morning line's off because it seems like it's
Yeah,
going to be
I
a
mean,
lot shorter than that.
yeah, and then, but this is a great, and I'm glad you said that, Chris, because I think that's also a great thing where like I really like the seven, but there's a price at which I won't like the seven anymore. And so as a horse player, I think it's important, you don't get too enamored with the morning line and just bet the horse no matter what. There's a price, probably anything below 6 to 1. I'm not as interested in this horse. So, all of our opinions, I think, are based upon those price points. And it's just important to always keep that in mind.
That's a really good point. So, I mean, you should always have some price, like you said, if you're going to key a horse or play it to win, that where you think it's value. Well, at what point is it no longer value? And what price do you expect it to go off at? Because for me, this one, you're saying 6 to 1. I think you might get 6 to 1, but that's probably about, around what you'll get. It's not going to be 10 to 1. I'd be really surprised to see this horse off that big win. Now it's not really going up in class that much. I mean, none of these
Yeah.
horses are great. Um, I just really be surprised to see it go off at that price. So it's better to be kind of thinking, all right, I'm looking for 6 to 1. Am I still, that's about what I think I'll get. Am I willing to bet it? Sounds like you would be, but, kind of be thinking ahead because, you don't want to come to this race and then be all upset when you see the horse open up at, 5 or 6 to 1.
Yeah.
And then you haven't really thought through how you're going to bet the race given that
No,
scenario.
exactly right. And the horse, the other one that I'll mention in this field, and there's a few you can talk about, but the other horse that I think is maybe fits a little bit of a similar description is the number 5 Charlie Charmer, who's 8 to 1 for Gustavo Rodriguez. This is a horse also coming off a maiden win against maiden 25s. So again, not really stepping up in class all that much in this particular field. And now that was not nearly as dominant of a win as the number 7 had Solutions, but still 8 to 1 with Kendrick up on the mount. Those are things that I like. And again, there's a price at which I won't like this horse anymore. But what I do like is that this horse has had ascending speed figures in every single career start. So has never really moved back and feels like a horse that just keeps getting better and better, shows good speed and also showed the ability to rate last time, which was nice. So, that's another one at a little bit of a price on the morning line. We'll see what price we get come post time, but one that I'm interested in as well.
Yeah, I can see that sort of a similar type of horse. The this race is this has the kind of horse I hate, and that's like the 2 horse
Yeah.
Shellac, who's the favorite. If you look at its form, when it's sprinted on the dirt, it's been really, really good. And when they've tried on synth or they've tried routing on sloppy tracks, it's been really, really bad. But now it's back sprinting on dirt. So it kind of looks like it will crush this field. But can you really rely on it? To me, this horse kind of stands out,
Hmm.
but I don't know if I can completely trust it. And it's trained by Linda Rice, so you're not going to get a price. But to me, this horse could win by 5 or it could run up the track.
Yep.
And the reason I'm a little nervous is because it's run up the track so often, but it really has had an excuse. Maybe it just doesn't like synth or the mud. If you assume it doesn't like synth or the mud, it stands out, really stands out in here. So to me, this would be a race where I would just have to like single that horse if I'm going to play, or just key it on top, or probably pass the race is kind of how because I have a hard time trying to beat this horse because I just think it's so much better than everybody else. But at the same time, there is a chance that it may not run at all. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. And, that horse makes me really nervous. And they have dropped it down to this level before.
Yeah.
And that's when Rice picked it up, and she tried it, she stepped it up, but again, it caught that muddy track. And now she's dropping it back down. So, to me, this horse is the kind I really hate because I don't want to bet on it and I don't want to bet against it.
You described my dilemma exactly. I shared the exact same thoughts on Shellac as you, a horse whose best effort will, like you said, be 5 or 6 lengths better than anybody else in this field. And the question is, or can you rely on the horse? But to your point, what has the horse done wrong sprinting on a fast track? Very little. Two very good third place finishes against Maiden Special Weight Company, to start its career, and then a dominating effort against lesser foes at Aqueduct 2 back. And outside of that, you can easily, from a handicapping standpoint, draw a line through every single other effort this horse has ever had. So, if you just isolate those 3 dirt sprints, really hard to get around. But again, and the thing is, you're not going to get 3-1 on this horse. I'd imagine this horse will be
It could
below
be
2-1.
it could be 3 to 5.
Yeah, yes,
If the
that sounds
barn
more
think
right.
if the barn thinks it's sound and ready to run, they're going to
Yeah,
hammer it, and
yeah.
and and you probably don't want to bet against it if they do, because it probably is going to gallop. That's why I hate to play it, because I don't. There's no price I'm willing to play this horse. If it goes up at 6-1, I don't want to play it because that's telling me something, and there's signal there. So it's like one of these horses where there's no price I could play it. No matter how low it goes, I can't play against it. No matter how high it goes, I can't bet on it. This is the kind of race I hate. This is one
Yeah.
I almost always have to pass.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It really is. And the presence of the two makes it very difficult, because I think if you take that horse out of the field,
And
then it
maybe it'll
becomes a
scratch. It's
very
Linda
easy
Rice,
field.
right?
Yeah.
It is Linda Rice. She scratches a lot of
Yep.
horses. She may scratch this one. Then it's a whole different race. Then, it's wide open, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's extremely wide open, because you have horses coming in, who are just kind of, career claimers. And you have a couple of horses that I highlighted who are maybe younger and kind of up and coming, and, might have some upside potential. And, you have horses that have been just kind of around the block, like a horse like the number 10, Tappert's Temper, who's 9-2, who just, 1 for 26. That horse, I'll let that horse beat me every single day of the week and twice on Sunday. So, it's going to be interesting if Shellac does scratch out of this race. Then you'd imagine the probably becomes the favorite. But a lot of these other horses that we've talked about are going to take some money.
Yeah. So for me, if Shellac is in, this is a hard pass. If they scratch, then a couple horses I'll just mention. I don't think you've talked about. Maybe since I talked so long about why I didn't like the race, I might have forgotten. But like the 6-horse detail oriented,
Hmm.
that horse ran some really good races when it started its career, and then it just went south. And now they've had time off, and they bring it back in a new barn, and a barn that's not, has some success. And that horse could run really well. I don't think it could beat Shellac if Shellac runs its race and enters, but the rest of them it could certainly beat. The question is it ready off the layoff? But it might be. The barn's not bad off the layoff, and to me that one's kind of interesting. And it's 20-1 in the morning line. It would be a lot less if Shellac were to scratch, but that one I was kind of interested in a bit. There is that question mark about the layoff, but its best race is probably as good or better than anybody else in here besides Shellac. There's no reason why it couldn't fire at first asking off the bench. So that one's kind of interesting at a big price. The other one I kind of like some, but not as much, mainly because of the price, is the 4-horse Reside, who did just get claimed. But this horse, ran pretty well on debut at Saratoga, but Belmont at Aqueduct, and won in a straight maiden race. So it had talent. Then something went wrong. It went on the bench. But its 3 races since have been on the muddy track off the layoff and 2 route races, and now they're changed barns and they're back to sprinting on a fast track. That horse could have a lot better race in it too. So those are the 2 that I might be interested in if Shellac were to scratch out of this race. If Shellac is in it's a hard pass for me. And if I really loved maybe a pick 3 or a pick 4 or a pick 5 or something, I would probably just single shellac. But for me, this is the kind of race that it usually just trips me up, and I just move on to the next race kind of thing.
Yeah, it is a tough one, and you're right that the board's going to tell you everything. That if it opens and shellac is entered in the race and not scratched, and the horse opens at 3 to 5, that tells you everything you need to know. And but that makes it very difficult to play, however you'd like. And usually in those types of races, I just turn the page and go to the race number 10.
That's right, and there's nothing wrong with that. And you're probably your wallet will be a little less light if you do it that consistently than it would be if you don't ever pass a race. So don't be afraid to pass. One of the main themes in my book, don't be afraid to pass a race. All right, so let's go to the last race. This one's another maiden claim, but it's on the turf. There's more horses I'm interested. To me, this is a lot more interesting than some of the other races we've talked about. I'll be curious to see what you have to say. Another one with just a lukewarm favorite, Garden of Grace, who is certainly no standout, but maybe you think it is. So I'll let you tell us what you think of the favorite in this race. It's a maiden claimer on the turf going 6 furlongs.
Yeah, I'm not enthralled with the number 3 Garden of Grace. I mean, certainly this is the sort of horse that I do tend to bet against, even on the class drop. 0 for 10 lifetime. You're getting a little bit of an equipment change. I obviously respect George Weaver in turf sprints, but and just in general, but I'm going to be playing against this one. The 2 horses that stuck out to me in this race are the number 8, Tuffletown for Rudy Brissett. Just because Rudy, who now has a string of horses consistently up here in New York, which is really wonderful. Rudy is so good on these maiden special weight to maiden claiming class drops. He has a very good sense of when he needs to drop his horses down. And when you look at this horse's one race on the turf, it was a really good effort. And, she nearly broke her maiden that day, finishing just second by a head to Greyjoy. And the third place finisher came back to win next time out. And that was even with a little bit of an issue at the start. So Tuffletown at 4 to 1 is a horse I very much so like. Third back in the form cycle. You get back onto the surface where she ran arguably her best race, even if it's not her highest buyer speed figure, for a barn that really knows how to drop horses in at the right time. And then the other one that I am very interested in is a little bit more of a price is the number 6 Avery's Wonderland at 10 to 1 for Rick Dutrow Jr., Ruben Silvera up on the mount. Again, a little bit of a makeover package. We're getting Lasix for the first time. Blinkers are coming on. We're getting a class drop as well. This one is run in those maiden optional claimers that we card sometimes in the fall here in New York, but has never really kind of been in for maiden claiming company before. So a little bit of a class drop, second back from that layoff. And I just, listen, I love the sire Omaha Beach, and I think that he's been getting better and better turf runners in his second and third crops. And so you give me a horse like this at 10 to 1 in this type of a race for a trainer like Rick Dutrow Jr. And this is the sort of horse I love playing in a bailout race.
Yeah, I agree. Both those horses I like as a chance. I'm Tuffletown at 4 to 1. Not sure there's a lot of value there, but I like the horse as chances. Avery's Wonder at 10 to 1. I think there's some value there for sure. That has that golden pattern second off the layoff as a 3-year-old. So nothing wrong with that horse at all. There are actually a couple of even bigger prices, kind of like the ones you liked in an earlier maiden race. The first one for me is the 2 Stella Fortuna. She's making her second start. And on her debut, she really had a no chance trip or ride, and she kind of broke slow, got grabbed, was way back, galloped out like a beast. Basically, looked like there's a lot more to that horse than that result would indicate. So maybe now in this race with a little better, trip and ride, there is a change in riders. Hopefully a little better break, a little more aggressive ride, and this horse could be right there at the end. could be a really big price, 20 to more one on the morning line. So I think that's, the race where you're going to see a horse potentially improve the most is in its second start. Especially if you have reasons to believe, it really didn't get a chance to run in its debut. And this is a great example of that. Another one kind of similar is Tis Improbable, the 5-horse. This horse, it ended up being an off the turf sloppy track. So right away you can kind of just toss that out. But if you watch the race, it just got a horrible start and shuffled way, way back. And they just kind of ran wide in a sloppy track. Again, kind of a no chance tripper ride. It was on the wrong surface. Second start now. Another one that's going to be a giant price. And it really is bred for the turf, and it was meant for the turf on debut. So those are the two kind of horses in this kind of race where, you could see that massive jump. There's really no horse that seemed like a standout that they would have to beat. At 20 or 30 to 1, those are the kind of horses I like to key on. And, maybe bet one or both of them to win. In this case, at that big of price, I might even play them both to win, but certainly use them both. And then I kind of like your two horses too, and try to beat that favorite Garden of Grace. And, beat the, let's see, there's nobody else in here I'm really worried about. So, this is a race where I might take a swing in the exotics, the vertical exotics. With two big prices in there, if I get one or both of them, in the number, you could make a pretty good score.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The thing is also kind of something goes back to something we both talked about at the beginning, which is, going against the grain and knowing how other bettors are probably going to play this race or where money is going to go. Because the reality is people bet George Weaver and Turf Sprints. So the 3 is going to get overbet as the favorite. And then the other thing is the number 12, who neither of us talked about, come Monday, is a Miguel Clement with Manny Franco up. Miguel, his horses get bet all the time, and for good reason, but I have no interest in betting this one and using this one at all in this race. But if hey, these are two horses that are going to take money, and I'm just going to go running the opposite direction and go to some big prices in this race, again, just knowing where the board is likely going to go can help give you so many more opportunities from a wagering standpoint.
Yeah, and the 12 is a good one because if this was a maiden special weight, I'd like the horse more. But starting in a maiden claimer is the reason why I'm willing to try to, beat that horse. Debuting in a maiden claimer isn't a vote of confidence from my perspective. So, yeah, I'm willing, especially parked on the outside as well. So that one and the other favorite, Garden of Grace, those to me are vulnerable kind of favorites that in this kind of a race, you definitely can take a shot against.
Absolutely.
So anything else? So going back over the sequence, what is the bet you're most interested in making? It has to be a win bet. It could be any kind of bet. Are you thinking of playing this pick 5? I'm definitely not. But you as an analyst, maybe you have to put together a pick 5. I don't know. But this is a tough sequence, right?
Yeah, I'll put together a pick 5, and this is a sequence that could change very quickly depending on scratches.
Oh yeah,
as well. That there are a couple of races that we talked about where scratches could really impact things. For me, the horse that I'm kind of most interested in taking a swing with is that number 7 Solutions in race number 9, trying to beat the favorite Shellac in this particular spot. So that's a horse that I really have my eye on. And then honestly, the two horses we talked about in the last race, Aviator's Wonderland and Tuffletown, are the two other horses that I'm probably most excited about in this sequence. But
maybe a double. You got a double there.
Well, there you go. Yeah, exactly. And so, you put together a nice little double and, you try to beat a favorite in one of them or both of them. And, you can get a handsome little payout there.
Yeah. Yeah. In big fields, you're beating the favorites. And I have hopefully you'll be beating not a odds on favorite, because if it's odds on, you probably won't beat it. But if it's not, say it's 3 to 1, 5 to 2, in there, that's to me a vote of not. That's a signal saying the horse is probably not gonna fire. Certainly, if it's higher than that. So yeah, I kind of like your little that's one where you could play a double. I could see that. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is one where I might play if Shellac runs and it's getting hammered, I might play a double to the two Stella Fortuna and the five Tis Improbable in that last race.
Mhm.
Um, Maybe not. It depends on what it's paying. I might just wait and just play it to win because sometimes if they're really getting hammered in the win pool, they get hammered in the doubles in the next race too. But we'll see. But I mean, that's why you got to be flexible and you got to think about how you're going to bet as much as how you're going to how you're handicapping the race. And that's something we've talked about. That the betting, how you're going to bet it. There's a lot of opportunities, a lot of options today in today's racing world, but you don't have to play every race. You don't have to play every pool. And, being smart about it can be the difference between winning and losing, even if you have a good opinion.
Absolutely. And there's, I will say we talked about, the one side of being flexible when maybe you really like a horse in reference to that horse solutions in race number 9 at 10 to 1 on the morning line. And you go, well, now listen, there's a price at which I maybe don't like that horse anymore. But I can't tell you, Chris, the number of times where I've, especially because I'm doing this for, I'm working on a Friday and a Saturday. So I'm, balancing my working with, watching the races and paying attention to it. I can't tell you the number of times I've looked up at a race where I thought I wasn't really interested in betting this race. And I'm doing written analysis or I'm doing something else. And I look up and I'll say out loud, and my coworkers probably get driven nuts by me doing this. And I go, how did they let this horse go off at 8 to 1 or something like that? All of a sudden this horse floated up from a price on the morning line I wasn't interested in. And suddenly now I'm looking at this horse winning at 8 to 1 and I'm going, oh my God, how could I not have, so you got to pay attention to it both ways. Sometimes there's a horse that maybe gets lost on the board for a variety of reasons. And maybe there's a really bad favorite that takes a ton of money. And suddenly a horse that was maybe a modest second or third choice is floating up significantly. And, so just always being able to pivot and pay attention to those things, I think is so important.
Yeah, you have to be paying attention and you have to be flexible. Absolutely
Yeah.
agree. All right, well, we're going to talk about one last race. We're going to shift gears, go to Thistledown in Ohio for the Ohio Derby. This is $500,000. This is, I guess, I don't know what you call them, but they're kind of the B-level derbies that they run every year. There's a lot of money at stake. There's some horses that have made pretty good bank on these kind of races in past years. Usually you get a mix of kind of later developing horses and horses that were on the Triple Crown Trail and now are kind of trying to pick off these secondary targets. And we've got a good mix here. The favorite, it will be either 8 Desert Gate, a Bob Baffert horse on a win streak in lesser races. And then you've got the 3-horse Chip Honcho, who's coming out of a pretty good effort in the Preakness. And he was in a lot of the Derby preps. Those two are probably vying for favoritism. There's some other horses that are going to take some money as well. What are you thinking about this Ohio Derby?
Well, it came up as a really good field. I think that's the first and foremost thing is, you have 5 Triple Crown alums, with Robusta, Chip Honcho, Oselli, Bull by the Horns, and Albus, all who ran in one or multiple Triple Crown races. So there's a lot of horses in here that the casual fan and horse player remembers from the Triple Crown run. And then, like you said, there's some new faces that are on the scene as well. And it's always a good opportunity for horses to kind of make an impression. I do think this race, and also, I don't play Thistledown all the time. I'm not going to act like I do. But one thing I will say is it usually tends to be a pretty speed favoring track on big days. And you saw horses like Moplex or Batten Down in recent years win this race with very forward rides. And even a horse like Two Fills a few years back as well. And so for me, it is hard to kind of get around the top 2 favorites just because they are controlling speed in the race, Chip Honcho and Desert Gate. And the really, I think the interesting thing is obviously Desert Gate feels like a horse that probably needs the lead. And with Flavian Pratt in that outside 8 post, will likely just gun it straight to the front. Chip Honcho's a really interesting horse. I can't say I've never been a huge fan of his. He ran, I thought, a really good Risen Star, obviously beating Golden Tempo that day and just getting nabbed by Paladin. But, the Preakness was a good third place effort, but never really made much of an impression, was never really a threat to win that day. I don't know, again, Napoleon Solo and Iron Honor are nice horses, but I think it's notable that nobody from the Preakness ran back in the Belmont Stakes. So again, I think that maybe that Preakness was maybe a second tier of horses. But from a betting standpoint, the horse that I'm most interested to bet in this race is actually the number 10 Albus for Riley Mott, 10 to 1 on the morning line for Pin Oak Stud. This is a horse that was steadily improving and getting better and better in every start, getting better stretching out, goes to that Wood Memorial, runs a really good race, and then goes to the Kentucky Derby. And everybody talked about the trip that Renegade got that day. It was really Albus in the two hole that got the worst of that trip. He was the one who got slammed in between horses and pinched all the way back to second to last. And that was really not his game. He's more of a horse that is a mid-pack runner in all honesty. And the really telling thing about this race is outside of those two horses, Desert Gate and Chip Honcho, there's and maybe Robusta, who hasn't shown much speed the last couple of times. There's really no other horses that even track the pace in this race. There's a lot of kind of plotters and mid-pack and closers. Albus could find himself sitting third or fourth in this race, I think, early on. You have that Bernardini influence with the Yopon up top, and this horse has already proven it a mile and an eighth, 10 to 1 on the morning line. He feels like, for me, the horse that I'm most interested to bet in this race.
Yeah, I'd say he actually likes to be forward. I think people got a little bit misled by his Wood. He was going pretty fast. They were just going incredibly fast up front, and it just set up for him. But he likes to be forward, and that's why I think his trouble was a lot worse than Renegade's, just because Renegade, he's going to be far back anyway, and the way the race set up, it probably helped him. But Albus didn't really want to be that far back, so I kind of see where you're coming from. I have a feeling a lot of people might see that, though. I'm not sure you'll get 10 to 1 on that horse. But I everything you said, I can't disagree with that. The one thing I will say is I think Robusta he showed some speed. He just was chasing some pretty fast horses in that race. Napoleon Solo, Iron Honor, Taj Mahal, those were fast horses. He just couldn't keep up with them. Chip Honcho wasn't that far ahead of him. And I think from that two post, they're going to send, especially with the rider. I have a feeling he'll be a pace factor. Don't think he'll be around at the end, but I think he'll help make it an honest pace more. It probably was going to be an honest pace anyway, but, I think he'll be forward. So, yeah, I kind of agree with that. Desert Gate, it's interesting. Bob Baffert, doesn't really go after these kind of races, but he hasn't had the greatest results in the Triple Crown races with his 3-year-olds in last few years. So maybe he's trying to pick off some of these a little lesser targets. So that's kind of interesting the way he spotted Desert Gate. He ran him at Lone Star and now here.
And
go ahead.
He's an interesting horse, Chris, just because I wonder if this is a little bit of a new Bob Baffert strategy now that he has a string at Churchill Downs, where he's going to, maybe some of his horses, like a Desert Gate, are going to start targeting Midwestern races in a way that they have never in the past. I mean, it's notable that this is a horse that's been working out at Churchill Downs. So the trip up to Thistledown is not that far. And he's a very interesting horse. I looked in the stats over the last 5 years. Bob Baffert had never run a horse at Lone Star until Desert Gate, and he has never run a horse at Thistledown until Desert Gate. So, this is maybe a new trend for him, but, he's an interesting horse and a talented one, but like you said, has been running against lesser competition.
Yeah, but it could be true. I mean, clearly he's changing his approach a bit. And Chip Honcho, I mean, Craig Malkowski was the guest when we had the Preakness discussion, and both of us thought he was distance challenged. He was a pretty good horse, and Asmussen's horses usually run the 3-year-olds. They just keep getting a little better. He probably wasn't good enough to win at the distance, Probably not a two-turn horse, but we thought maybe in some race like the Ohio Derby, he
Yeah.
might be good enough to win, go around two turns. But at some point, he'll probably have to cut back. So we'll find out, if he's good enough to win in this kind of company going two turns. I have a feeling he may come up short again, but I wouldn't be shocked to see him win. I wouldn't bet on him at a short price. I just have a feeling we'll see him going one turn mile at Ellis Park or Churchill probably in the not too distant future. That's probably his wheelhouse. But I don't blame him for trying to, win a $500,000 race in a race where he's going to be one of the favorites.
Yeah.
I
No.
just couldn't bet him. So, I don't really have a whole lot to add other than I will say the one horse I'm kind of interested in is the 6-horse Zenal because I touted him on the podcast. I thought he would run better when they put him on the turf. He got hung wide and really didn't run a step on the turf when they finally put him in a race at Churchill. So they ran him back on the dirt in Indiana, and he ran well. He won the race, and it was actually better than it looked because he and another horse were way ahead of the rest of the field. So it was at Indiana Downs, but they crushed the rest of the field. And I have a feeling the horse he beat is probably not a bad horse because they were so far ahead of the rest of the pack. Now they wheeled him back in here. I don't know if they've scratched him 2 or 3 times before, so they may scratch him out of this race. But if they were to run him, I think he could be sitting in that second flight. And I think he has a lot of talent. So he'd be one I'm sort of interested in. I have a feeling he'll scratch. But if he were to go, he'd be the one I might try to use somehow in exotics. He's the only one from a value standpoint I'm kind of interested in. All the rest of them, I'm not so keen on. I mean, Trendsetter isn't bad, but 5-1 is probably about fair value. Same with Ocelli. Probably, like you said, the typical track bias there isn't going to help him. But, all of his main rivals are probably going to be forward. So if they get tired, he could pick up the pieces like he typically does. I just couldn't play him to win at a short price. So there's really just nothing in here that I could bet other than maybe Zenal if he goes. And it would be more kind of a little bit on top, but more trying to use him as the way to get some value out of the race.
Chris, I'm so glad you mentioned Zenal. He is a horse I literally set an alarm on my phone to make sure I did not forget to bet the Churchill Downs race when he switched on the turf because
Yeah.
I was just like you. I thought this horse is going to love the surface switch. He's got a huge turf family, quality road up top. Jonathan Thomas horse on the grass. It just checked every box for me. And you're right, did very little running that day. He's an interesting horse because I agree. And by the way, that horse he beat at Horseshoe Indy, Bold Stand, that's a Godolphin horse for Owen Hardy. And to your point, that's not a bad horse he beat, and they were 11 and a quarter lengths clear of everybody else. He's really interesting. I don't know how I'll bet him, but I am definitely going to throw a few bucks on him and underneath in an exacta trifecta sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm really questioning whether he'll run because he just ran a week ago. But I don't mind when they wheel him back like that aggressively. But they've been all over the place with this horse, literally. I mean, they've entered him, in on the Preakness undercard at Churchill, at Santa Anita, Indiana. I mean, now in Ohio. So I'm not sure I'm not sure where they're going with this horse. But if he were to run, I'd have to have something on him. Use him some way. No big bet or anything, but I gotta because I didn't bet him last time just because I knew he was going to get bet. I actually didn't bet him. I didn't really bet much at all on even on the Churchill race because he took so much money. It was where it really wasn't any value left. Because the horse they're high on this horse. He trains really well too, so I don't know. And maybe he's put it together. Maybe he can put it all together and this bigger race. We'll see. I'd love to see him stay in the race because then I'll have a bit of a betting interest if he does.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anything else you want to add? You have, and you. I mean, it seems like you are looking at a lot of races every day. Is there any other race on Saturday that you've looked at, either on the Belmont card or anywhere else that has got you excited that we haven't talked about?
I haven't dove into the Churchill card yet, and I know I'm going to look at some of the races for Sunday at Monmouth because I have a couple of stakes races I'll be looking at. Um, but yeah, this is the time of the week where I start really grinding away on the Saturday cards. So I got through Belmont, I got through Thistledown, Churchill's next up this afternoon. So I'll have a lot of stuff out there on social media if people follow me, and
Well, what is your
always
give
enjoy
them
it.
your handle on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. Failed to Menace is my handle, which is my favorite running line note. So that always made me laugh because I always thought the notes in the past performances were always so staccato. And then all of a sudden, every once in a while, they would have a this very almost like poetic phrase, failed to menace, appear. And I just always liked that from the time I was a little kid going to the track at Penn National. And so when it came time to have a Twitter handle, I thought, well, that's just perfect. So that's where people can find me.
All right. Failed to Menace, at Failed to Menace and that's on Twitter or /X, I guess now
Yes.
we call it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Matthew, for joining me today, and to all the listeners who make the show. That'll conclude number 366 of the Sport of Kings podcast. Good luck this weekend, and please enjoy the Brooklyn Boogaloo Blowout. Cheers. That's a wrap.
All right, awesome.
Thank you.